The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the congressional hearing room, casting long shadows across the mahogany table where history had been made countless times before. Today felt different, though. There was electricity in the air, the kind you feel right before a storm hits. People started filling the room early, much earlier than usual. Reporters clutched their notebooks and checked their recording devices twice, maybe 3 times. They knew something big was coming. You could see it in their eyes, that hungry look journalists get when they smell a story that might make headlines. Representative Lisa Chen walked into the room at exactly 9:30. She had been preparing for this day for weeks, maybe months. Her briefcase was packed with documents, charts, and what she believed was solid evidence of government wrongdoing. She wore her best navy suit, the one that made her feel confident and powerful. Her staff had worked overtime to help her prepare, and she felt ready to take on anyone who stood in her way. The witness chair sat empty, waiting. In about 30 minutes, David Rodriguez would take that seat. Rodriguez had spent 20 years working in government, climbing his way up through different departments. He had seen administrations come and go, weathered political storms that would break lesser men, and earned respect even from his opponents. But today, he was walking into what many people expected to be the fight of his career. The gallery filled up quickly. Citizens who had taken time off work sat next to political activists and college students writing papers on government. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when Chen and Rodriguez faced off. Some people had driven hours just to witness this moment in person. Television crews set up their cameras in designated spots around the room. The main networks were all there, along with smaller outlets and independent journalists live streaming on their phones. Social media was already buzzing with predictions about what might happen. People were taking sides before the hearing even. Committee members trickled in one by one, each carrying their own agenda and expectations. Some supported Chen completely, believing she was doing important work to hold the government accountable. Others thought she was grandstanding, trying to make a name for herself by attacking a respected public servant. The tension between different political viewpoints was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rodriguez arrived at 9:45, walking calmly through the crowd of reporters shouting questions at him. He did not stop to answer any of them. His face showed no emotion, no hint of worry or stress. This was not his first rodeo, and everyone could tell. He had testified before Congress dozens of times, answered tough questions from senators and representatives who thought they could intimidate him. It never worked. Chen watched Rodriguez enter the room. She studied his walk, his posture, the way he nodded politely to people he recognized. She was looking for any sign of weakness, any crack in his armor she could exploit during her questioning. But Rodriguez gave nothing away. He was a professional, and professionals do not show their cards until they are ready to play them. The committee chair called for order at exactly 10 o'clock. The room fell quiet, except for the soft clicking of camera shutters and the scratch of pens on paper. This was it. Months of preparation, weeks of media buildup, and hours of strategy meetings had led to this moment. Rodriguez raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. His voice was steady and clear as he spoke the oath that countless witnesses had spoken before him. Chen organized her papers one last time, checking her notes and making sure her questions were in the right order. She had practiced this presentation in front of mirrors, with her staff, even with her family. She knew exactly what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it. The opening statements began with routine matters. Committee members introduced themselves and explained the purpose of the hearing for those watching at home. But everyone in the room knew this was just the warm-up. The real action would start when Chen got her turn to question Rodriguez. People in the gallery leaned forward in their seats. Reporters positioned their pens over fresh pages. Camera operators adjusted their focus. Even the security guards seemed more alert than usual. The anticipation was building like pressure in a steam kettle, and everyone could feel it. Rodriguez sat quietly during the opening remarks, occasionally sipping water from a glass in front of him. He looked completely relaxed, as if he was attending a friendly meeting rather than a congressional hearing that could damage his reputation and career. But inside, he was mentally preparing for battle. He had reviewed every document, studied every possible question Chen might ask, and thought through his responses carefully. Chen glanced at the clock on the wall. Her time was coming soon. She could feel her heart beating a little faster, not from nerves but from excitement. This was her moment to shine, her chance to prove that she was a serious legislator who could hold powerful people accountable. She believed she had Rodriguez cornered, that her evidence was so strong he would have no choice but to admit wrongdoing. The morning light continued to stream through those tall windows, but now it felt more like a spotlight illuminating a stage, where two skilled performers were about to give the performance of their lives. Neither Chen nor Rodriguez knew it yet, but in just a few minutes, one sentence would change everything and create a moment that people would remember for years to come. The room held its breath, waiting for the real show to begin. The committee chair looked around the room one final time, before nodding toward Representative Chen. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from California for her questioning. Those simple words were like the starting gun at a race. Chen straightened in her chair, cleared her throat, and began what she hoped would be the most important speech of her political career. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. She looked directly at Rodriguez, who sat calmly with his hands folded on the table in front of him. "Mr. Rodriguez, I want to start by asking you about the events of last September. Do you remember what happened on September 15th? Rodriguez nodded slightly. "I remember many things that happened in September, Congresswoman. Could you be more specific about what you're referring to?" Chen smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a hunter gets when they spot their prey. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, but let me refresh your memory." She picked up a thick folder from the table and opened it with deliberate slowness. The pages inside were marked with colorful tabs and sticky notes. This was her ammunition, and she wanted everyone in the room to see how much she had prepared. "On September 15th, your department received a memo about budget irregularities, a memo that somehow disappeared from official records just 3 days later. Isn't that interesting?" Chen's voice grew stronger with each word. She was building momentum like a train picking up speed. The reporters in the room started writing faster. This was the kind of detail they had been waiting for. Budget irregularities, missing documents, government cover-ups. These were the ingredients that made front-page stories. Rodriguez remained calm. "Congresswoman, thousands of memos cross my desk every month. Without seeing the specific document you're referring to, I cannot comment on its contents or what may have happened to it." "How convenient," Chen shot back quickly. "You can't remember a memo about millions of dollars in missing funds, but I bet you remember what you had for breakfast this morning." A few people in the gallery chuckled at her sarcasm. Chen was playing to the crowd, and she knew it. She pulled out another document, this one with bright yellow highlighting covering most of the page. "Let me help you remember. This is an email from your assistant to the budget director. It says, and I quote, 'The boss wants this handled quietly. No paper trail.' Does that ring any bells now?" The room grew quieter. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. This was exactly the kind of smoking gun evidence that could end careers and change administrations. Chen had everyone's attention now, and she was not about to waste it. Rodriguez studied the document Chen was holding up, but his expression did not change. "Congresswoman, I would need to see the full context of that communication, including the date, the complete email thread, and verification of its authenticity, before I could provide any meaningful response." "Oh, you want context?" Chen's voice rose slightly. She was getting excited now, sensing weakness. "Let me give you all the context you need." She reached for yet another folder, this one even thicker than the first. The sound of papers rustling filled the room as she flipped through pages covered in handwritten notes. For the next 15 minutes, Chen laid out what she claimed was a pattern of financial misconduct, document destruction, and deliberate cover-ups. She spoke about budget transfers that happened in the middle of the night, about meetings that were not recorded in official calendars, about phone calls made from personal devices instead of government lines. With each new accusation, the atmosphere, In the room grew more intense. Committee members leaned forward to hear every word. Some nodded along with Chen's presentation, while others looked skeptical. But everyone was paying attention. Rodriguez listened to everything without interrupting. Occasionally he would jot down a note on the legal pad in front of him, but mostly he just sat there, absorbing the attack with the patience of someone who had been through this kind of thing before. Chen was hitting her stride now. She had practiced this presentation so many times that the words flowed naturally. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who believed completely in what she was saying. Mr. Rodriguez, the American people deserve answers. They deserve to know why millions of their tax dollars seem to have vanished into thin air while you and your colleagues were supposedly watching the store. The gallery was completely silent now. Even the reporters had stopped writing and were just listening to every word. This was political theater at its finest, and Chen was giving the performance of her lifetime. You've had 3 weeks to prepare for this hearing, Chen continued, her voice growing more forceful. 3 weeks to come up with explanations for these irregularities. 3 weeks to gather documents and witnesses who could support your version of events. So I'm going to ask you directly, and I want a straight answer. Rodriguez finally looked up from his notes and made eye contact with Chen. For the first time since the hearing began, he seemed fully engaged and ready to respond. The room held its breath. The question is simple, Chen said, pausing dramatically. She looked around the room, making sure every camera was focused on her. Every reporter was ready to capture Rodriguez's response. Did you, or did you not authorize the transfer of $4.7 million from the infrastructure account to an unnamed discretionary fund? And if you did, can you explain to the American people where that money went? It was a complex question with multiple parts. The kind of question that politicians love because it is almost impossible to answer simply. But it was also the kind of question that could trap someone if they were not careful with their response. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Rodriguez looked down at his notes one more time, then back up at Chen. When he finally spoke, his voice was as calm and steady as it had been all morning. But what he said next would change everything. Rodriguez took a slow sip of water from the glass in front of him. The sound seemed louder than it should have in the dead silence of the room. Every eye was on him, every camera focused on his face, waiting for his response to Chen's devastating question about the missing $4.7 million. Chen sat back in her chair with the satisfied look of someone who had just delivered what she believed was a knockout punch. Her months of preparation had led to this moment. She had built her case piece by piece, document by document, and now she had asked the question that would either force Rodriguez to admit wrongdoing or catch him in a lie that would destroy his career. The reporters in the gallery had their pens ready. Some were already typing on their phones, preparing to send breaking news alerts the moment Rodriguez gave his answer. The committee members on both sides of the political divide waited with barely concealed anticipation. Even the security guards seemed to lean in slightly, caught up in the drama of the moment. Rodriguez set down his water glass and looked directly at Chen. His face showed no emotion, no sign of panic or concern. If anything, he looked almost peaceful, like someone who had finally reached the moment they had been preparing for their entire career. Congresswoman Chen, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. Before I answer your question about the $4.7 million, I want to make sure I understand exactly what you're accusing me of. Chen's confidence flickered for just a moment. This was not how she had expected him to respond. She had anticipated either a denial, an admission, or perhaps some kind of legal mumbling about not being able to comment on ongoing investigations. But Rodriguez seemed to be taking control of the conversation in a way she had not prepared for. I'm not accusing you of anything, Chen said, though her tone suggested otherwise. I'm simply asking you to explain to the American people what happened to their money. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I see. So you want me to explain what happened to money that you claim disappeared from government accounts, money that you say I authorized to be moved without proper documentation or oversight? The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Chen felt a small knot forming in her stomach, though she could not quite explain why. Rodriguez was not acting like someone who had been caught red-handed. He was acting like someone who knew something she did not. That's correct, Chen said, trying to maintain her aggressive tone. The American people deserve to know where their tax dollars went. Rodriguez picked up a single sheet of paper from the small stack in front of him. It was not one of the colorful, highlighted documents that Chen had been waving around. It was just a plain white piece of paper with typed text on it. You're absolutely right, Congresswoman. The American people do deserve to know where their money went. So let me tell you exactly what happened to that $4.7 million you're so concerned about. Chen leaned forward slightly. This was it. He was going to confess. All her hard work was about to pay off. On September 18th, 3 days after the memo you mentioned earlier, that $4.7 million was transferred to the Emergency Disaster Relief Fund to help victims of Hurricane Patricia, which had just devastated 3 states and left over 50,000 people homeless. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Chen's face went white. The reporters stopped writing. Committee members on both sides of the political divide turned to look at each other with expressions of shock and confusion. Rodriguez continued in the same calm, steady voice. The transfer was made using emergency authorization procedures that have been in place since 2019. Procedures that were established specifically to allow rapid response to natural disasters without waiting for the normal bureaucratic approval, process that can take weeks or months. Chen's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She shuffled through her papers frantically, looking for something, anything, that would help her respond to this unexpected revelation. The unnamed discretionary fund you mentioned, Rodriguez went on, is actually the Emergency Disaster Relief Fund, which by law cannot be identified by name in certain financial documents to prevent fraud and ensure the money reaches victims quickly without interference from political interests or special interest groups. The room was still silent, but now it was a different kind of silence. It was not the breathless anticipation of moments before. It was the stunned quiet that follows, a completely unexpected turn of events. As for the meetings that were not recorded in official calendars, Rodriguez said, consulting his piece of paper, those were emergency coordination sessions with FEMA, the Red Cross, and state emergency management officials who were working around the clock to save lives and provide shelter for hurricane victims. Chen finally found her voice, though it was much quieter than it had been just minutes before. But the memo, the one that disappeared from official records, was classified as confidential by the Department of Homeland Security because it contained sensitive information about disaster response capabilities that could potentially be used by bad actors to interfere with relief efforts, Rodriguez replied, without missing a beat. The committee chairman shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Several committee members were looking down at their own notes, probably wondering if they had missed something important in their preparation for this hearing. Rodriguez was not finished. Congresswoman, I understand your concern about government accountability. It's an important part of your job, and the American people are lucky to have representatives who take that responsibility seriously. But I have to ask you this. He paused and looked directly at Chen, his eyes meeting hers across the room. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that had not been there before. Did you or your staff contact the Department of Emergency Management, FEMA, or any of the state agencies involved in Hurricane Patricia response to verify the information in your documents before you decided to use this hearing to suggest that millions of dollars in disaster relief money had been stolen or misused? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Chen's face flushed red. She looked down at her papers, then back up at Rodriguez, then over at her staff members who were seated behind her. None of them met her eyes. We conducted a thorough investigation based on the documents we received, Chen stammered. That's not what I asked, Rodriguez said gently but firmly. I asked if you contacted the agencies responsible for disaster relief to verify your information. It's a simple yes or no question. Chen's confident demeanor had completely evaporated. The hunter had become the hunted, and everyone in the room could see it happening in real time. The reporters were writing again, but now they were documenting Chen's discomfort rather than Rodriguez's downfall. We relied on the documents we had, Chen said finally. Rodriguez nodded slowly. I see. So you built your entire case, called this hearing, accused government officials of financial misconduct, and questioned the integrity of career public servants, all without making a single phone call to verify whether there might be a legitimate explanation for the transactions you were questioning. The silence that followed was deafening. Chen sat frozen in her chair, surrounded by her carefully organized documents that now seemed to mock her rather than support her. The political theater she had orchestrated so carefully had turned into her own nightmare. Rodriguez set down his piece of paper and folded his hands on the table. Congresswoman, fighting government corruption is noble work, but so is making. Sure, hurricane victims get the help they need to rebuild their lives. I hope that in the future, you'll consider the possibility that not everything that looks suspicious actually is, and that sometimes government officials are just trying to do their jobs and help people who need it most. The room remained silent as the full impact of what had just happened sank in. In the span of just a few minutes, what had seemed like a clear case of government wrongdoing had been revealed as a complete misunderstanding, and the person who had seemed like a crusading hero had been exposed as someone who had not done their homework. Chen's moment of triumph had become her moment of humiliation, and it had all happened in front of a national television audience that would remember this day for a very long time. The silence in the hearing room stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Chen sat motionless in her chair, staring down at the stack of documents that had seemed so important just minutes ago. Her face was pale except for two bright red spots on her cheeks. The confident woman who had started this hearing ready to take down a government official was gone, replaced by someone who looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. Rodriguez remained calm and professional, but there was something different about him now. The defensive posture he had maintained throughout Chen's attack was gone. He sat up straighter, his shoulders relaxed, looking like a man who had just completed a difficult but necessary task. The committee chairman cleared his throat, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Does the gentlewoman from California have any further questions for the witness? His voice was carefully neutral, but everyone in the room could hear the underlying tension. Chen looked up slowly, her eyes scanning the faces of her fellow committee members. Some looked sympathetic, understanding that any of them could have made the same mistake. Others appeared frustrated or embarrassed, probably thinking about how this hearing would reflect on the entire committee. A few seemed almost relieved that the focus was on Chen's mistakes rather than their own political positions. No, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions at this time, Chen said quietly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, a stark contrast to the confident tone she had used just an hour earlier. The reporters in the gallery were having a field day. Their phones buzzed constantly as editors back at their news organizations demanded updates on this unexpected turn of events. What had started as a story about potential government corruption had become a story about political embarrassment and the importance of fact-checking. One veteran reporter in the front row was already typing furiously on her laptop, crafting a story that would run with headlines like, "Congressional hearing goes wrong," or "Representative's attack backfires." Spectacularly, she had covered politics for 20 years and had seen plenty of hearings go sideways, but rarely had she witnessed such a complete reversal of fortune happen so quickly. Rodriguez picked up his water glass and took another sip. The simple action seemed to signal that he was ready to move on, that he held no grudges against Chen despite her public attack on his integrity. When he spoke again, his voice carried no hint of anger or satisfaction. "Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to add something," Rodriguez said. The chairman nodded. "The witness may proceed. I want to thank Congresswoman Chen for bringing attention to the importance of government accountability," Rodriguez began. "Her concerns about proper documentation and oversight are valid, and I respect her commitment to serving the American people. Sometimes these misunderstandings happen when we're all trying to do our jobs quickly during crisis situations." Chen looked up at Rodriguez with surprise. She had expected him to gloat, to push his advantage, and make her look even worse. Instead, he was offering her a way to save face, a chance to frame this embarrassing moment as a learning experience rather than a complete failure. "The hurricane I mentioned, Hurricane Patricia, was one of the most devastating storms to hit our region in decades," Rodriguez continued. The emergency response required coordination between multiple agencies and rapid decision-making that sometimes meant we had to act first and complete paperwork later. I understand how that might look suspicious to someone reviewing the records without knowing the full context. Committee members were nodding now, appreciating Rodriguez's gracious response. The tension in the room began to ease slightly as people realized that this hearing was not going to end with bitter accusations and personal attacks. But the damage to Chen's reputation was already done. In the age of social media and instant news, clips of her fumbled questioning were already circulating online. Political opponents would use this moment against her in future campaigns. Late night, comedy shows would probably joke about it for weeks. Chen's staff members, seated behind her, were frantically checking their phones and whispering to each other. They knew they would be partly blamed for this disaster. Someone should have made those phone calls to verify the information. Someone should have dug deeper into the documents before allowing their boss to build an entire hearing around them. The committee chairman looked around the room, clearly eager to bring this uncomfortable session to a close. Are there any other members who wish to question the witness? A few hands went up, but the questions that followed were softball inquiries designed more to give Rodriguez a chance to explain disaster relief procedures than to challenge his actions. The other committee members had learned from Chen's mistake and were not about to make the same error. Rodriguez answered each question thoroughly and professionally, using the opportunity to educate the committee and the viewing public about how emergency response actually works. He explained the legal authorities that allow rapid fund transfers during disasters, the security considerations that sometimes require classified communications, and the coordination challenges that government agencies face when trying to help people quickly. As the hearing wound down, Chen gathered her papers slowly, mechanically. The colorful tabs and sticky notes that had seemed so important now looked like the props from a failed performance. Her carefully prepared presentation had collapsed in the face of one simple truth that she had failed to discover. The media coverage began before the hearing even ended. News websites published articles with headlines like "Hurricane Relief," "Funds Mistaken for Missing Money," and "Congressional Hearing Reveals Miscommunication, Not Corruption." The story was spreading quickly across social media platforms, with people sharing clips of Rodriguez's devastating response to Chen's accusations. Political analysts were already being booked for evening news shows, ready to discuss what this hearing meant for government oversight and the importance of thorough investigation before making public accusations. Some would defend Chen, arguing that aggressive questioning is necessary to keep government honest. Others would criticize her for grandstanding without doing proper research. As the committee chairman finally brought the hearing to a close, Rodriguez stood up and began packing his notes into a simple briefcase. Several committee members approached him to shake hands and thank him for his service, particularly his work coordinating disaster relief efforts. The man who had entered the room as a target of investigation was leaving as something of a hero. Chen remained in her seat longer than necessary, probably hoping the room would empty out before she had to face the reporters waiting outside. Her staff members huddled around her, trying to figure out how to handle the media questions that were sure to come. The veteran reporter in the front row watched Chen's discomfort with professional interest but also some sympathy. Politics was a rough business and everyone made mistakes. The difference was that Chen's mistake had happened in front of television cameras and would be remembered for years to come. As people filed out of the hearing room, conversations buzzed with analysis of what had just happened. Some praised Rodriguez for his patient, professional response to unfair attacks. Others felt sorry for Chen, recognizing that her intentions had been good even if her execution was flawed. The hearing room slowly emptied, leaving only the cleaning crew to straighten chairs and collect forgotten papers. The morning sun that had streamed through the tall windows at the beginning of the hearing was now afternoon light, marking the end of a day that would be remembered as a perfect example of how quickly political fortunes can change. Rodriguez walked out of the building into the afternoon sunshine, ready to return to his work helping communities recover from natural disasters. Chen eventually made her way through the crowd of reporters, declining to answer questions and promising a statement later. The hearing was over, but its impact would last much longer. It had reminded everyone watching about the importance of facts over accusations, thorough investigation over political theater, and the truth that sometimes the most devastating response to an attack is simply telling the truth.